Nobody threw us a parade. Nobody thanked us for our service. We just came home quietly, one by one, and everyone pretended we'd never left. The Forgotten War, they're calling it now. Fitting name. They forgot it while we were still fighting it. Forgot us while we were still dying. Came home to silence and indifference and a country that had already moved on. 19 years. It's been 19 years since I came home from Korea. Since I stepped off that transport plane at Travis Air Force Base in California, collected my discharge papers, and disappeared back into civilian life like I'd never been gone. Like the past 2 years had never happened. Like the 37,000 Americans who died there had never existed. I'm talking about this now because my son asked me. He's 16. Came home from school yesterday talking about Vietnam, about the protests, about the boys being drafted, about how maybe he should enlist when he turns 18, do his part, serve his country like his old man did. I told him no, told him to run to Canada if they drafted him, told him war isn't what he thinks it is, that serving your country gets you nothing but nightmares and a silent homecoming and 19 years of pretending you're fine when you're not. He looked at me like I was crazy. Maybe I am. Maybe Korea made me crazy. Maybe coming home to nothing made me crazy. Hard to tell anymore. My name is Thomas Parker, Sergeant, United States Army, 2nd Infantry Division. I was in Korea from July 1951 to August 1953. 2 years. 2 years of my life spent in mountains and valleys that nobody cared about, fighting a war nobody understood, watching friends die for a line on a map that ended up exactly where it started. I was 21 when I went, 23 when I came back. Should have been the prime of my life. Those years, building a career, starting a family, living. Instead, I spent them in frozen mountains watching kids from Kansas and Texas and Ohio die from Chinese bullets and Korean cold and American indifference. And when it was over, when the Armistice was signed and the shooting stopped and we packed up to come home, nobody cared. The papers barely mentioned it. The country just shrugged. The war that had been going on for 3 years, that had killed 37,000 Americans and millions of Koreans and Chinese, it just ended. No victory celebrations, no ticker tape parades, no job well done. Just silence. We came home to silence. And 19 years later, that silence still echoes, still defines everything, still reminds us that we fought a war nobody wanted to remember for a country that didn't want to thank us. Korea. Most Americans couldn't find it on a map in 1950. Still can't. Small country, cold country, mountainous country, divided country, communist north, democratic south, the dominoes falling. Had to stop them, had to fight. Or so they told us. I got drafted in June 1951. Draft notice came in the mail. Greetings from the president. Your country needs you. Report for basic training. No choice, no debate, just orders. Basic training at Fort Benning, 8 weeks. They taught us how to shoot, how to march, how to follow orders. Taught us we were fighting communism, fighting for freedom, fighting to protect the American way of life. What they didn't teach us was how to fight in mountains, in cold, in terrain where the enemy could be anywhere, where Chinese soldiers would swarm positions in human waves, where frostbite killed more men than bullets some months, where you'd take a hill one day and lose it the next, and take it again the day after that. And none of it mattered because the line never really moved. They didn't teach us how to come home afterward either, how to live with what we'd seen, how to explain it to people who didn't care, how to exist in a country that had forgotten you existed. Should have. That's probably the most important thing they should have taught. But they didn't. So we learned it the hard way. I arrived in Korea in October 1951. The war had been going on for over a year. The big offensives were over. Incheon, the Pusan perimeter, The Chinese intervention, the retreat from the Yalu, all ancient history by then. Now it was static warfare, trench warfare, World War I with radios, sitting on hills, defending positions, attacking positions, back and forth, over and over, men dying for ground that didn't matter, for hills with numbers instead of names, Hill 931, Hill 1062, Pork Chop Hill, Heartbreak Ridge. My unit was stationed near the 38th parallel, the middle of nowhere, mountains, valleys, rice paddies in summer, snow and ice in winter, bitter, bone-deep cold that made you think you'd never be warm again, the kind of cold that killed you if you weren't careful, that took fingers and toes and ears, that made weapons jam and vehicles fail and men die in their sleep. The Chinese were dug in across from us, sometimes close enough to hear them talking at night. We'd shell them. They'd shell us. We'd patrol. They'd patrol. We'd attack. They'd counterattack. Men would die. Positions would change, then change back, then change again. Endless, pointless, grinding. And back home? Back home, nobody cared. The papers barely covered it. Television ignored it. People went about their lives, bought houses, had babies, watched baseball. The economy was booming. Suburbs were growing. America was prosperous and happy and completely uninterested in the war their sons were fighting. We knew. We got letters from home, read about Eisenhower's campaign, about I Love Lucy, about the new cars, about everything except the war. Nobody wanted to hear about the war. Nobody wanted to think about it, so they didn't. We were dying in silence, fighting in silence, suffering in silence, and nobody noticed. Private Danny Morrison, 19 years old, from a small town in Oklahoma. Mechanic before he got drafted. Good kid. Funny. Always trying to keep morale up. Talked about his girlfriend constantly, Betty Sue. They were going to get married when he got home. Had it all planned out. February 1952. Routine patrol. Hit a Chinese ambush. Danny took a round through the stomach. Died over 3 hours. Screaming, crying, calling for his mother, for Betty Sue, for anyone. We couldn't evacuate him. Too much fire. Couldn't help him. No morphine left. Just had to watch him die. Slowly. Painfully. Alone except for us, and we couldn't do anything. I wrote Betty Sue after. Told her Danny loved her. Told her he talked about her all the time. Told her he died quickly without pain. All lies. But what else could I say? That he died screaming? That it took 3 hours? That he suffered? That wouldn't help anyone. She never wrote back, never acknowledged my letter. Probably got married, probably moved on, probably forgot Danny Morrison ever existed. Just like everyone else. Corporal James Wu, Chinese-American from San Francisco, 22 years old, pre-med before the draft, smart guy, should have been a doctor, should have saved lives instead of taking them. The irony wasn't lost on him. The Chinese soldiers we fought, sometimes they'd shout at him in Mandarin, try to get him to defect, tell him he was on the wrong side, that he should be fighting with his people, not against them. It ate at him. The confusion, the identity crisis, the knowledge that the enemy looked like him and spoke like him and probably had families just like his. April 1952, Chinese night attack. They overran our position, hand-to-hand fighting, chaos, darkness. Wu died fighting them, died fighting people who looked like him, died confused about which side he was even on, died wondering if any of it made sense. It didn't. None of it made sense. Sergeant Mike O'Brien, career Army, 30 years old, veteran of World War II. Anzio, Market Garden. The guy who should have survived, who had the experience, who knew what he was doing, who'd made it through the worst war in history. June 1952, artillery barrage, Chinese 122-millimeter shells. One landed right in our trench, direct hit. O'Brien just disappeared, vaporized. Nothing left but his dog tags and a dark stain on the earth. 30 years old, survived the Nazis. Killed by Chinese artillery in a war nobody cared about. His wife got a telegram. His kids got a flag. The country got nothing. Didn't even notice. Mike O'Brien, veteran, father, soldier, he just vanished from existence, and nobody except his family and his unit even knew he'd been alive. That's what Korea was. Men dying in anonymity, fighting in obscurity, serving in silence. And when they died forgotten. Died for a war nobody was watching, for a cause nobody could explain, for a country that had already moved on. July 27th, 1953. The armistice was signed, the shooting stopped. After 3 years, 37,000 American dead, millions of Korean and Chinese casualties, the war ended. Not with victory, not with defeat. Just ended. Both sides agreed to stop shooting and went back to roughly where they'd started. All that death, all that suffering, for a stalemate. We heard about it over the radio. Command telling us the war was over. We'd won, or hadn't lost, or something. Nobody quite knew what to say. How do you celebrate a tie? How do you claim victory when the line ended where it began? How do you tell men that their friends died for nothing? You don't. You just tell them to pack up. Tell them they're going home. Tell them to be grateful they survived. I wasn't grateful. I was numb, empty, hollow. 2 years of my life, 2 years of watching friends die, 2 years of killing, 2 years of cold and fear and mud and blood. And for what? For a line on a map that hadn't moved. For a country split in two that's still split in two. For a victory that wasn't a victory. We packed up, processed out, got on transport ships, sailed back to America, left Korea behind, left the mountains and the cold and the trenches and the bodies, left it all behind physically, but not mentally, never mentally. The crossing took 2 weeks, gave us time to decompress, to process, to talk. Some guys talked about what they'd do when they got home, jobs they'd get, girls they'd marry, lives they'd restart. Some guys didn't talk at all, just stared at the ocean, lost in memories, lost in the weight of what they'd seen and done and survived. I was in the second group. Couldn't think about the future, could only think about the past, about Danny Morrison dying in the dirt, about James Wu dying confused, about Mike O'Brien disappearing, about all of them, all the dead, all the forgotten, all the men who'd never come home. We arrived at Travis Air Force Base in August 1953. Expected something. Welcome home ceremony, debriefing, acknowledgement, something, anything. Got nothing. Just processed our discharge papers, collected our pay, got handed civilian clothes, told to go home. That was it. 2 years of service, 2 years of combat, dismissed with paperwork and a handshake. No parade, no thanks, no recognition, just silence. I took a bus to Oakland, train from Oakland to Chicago, another bus to Indianapolis, home. My mother cried when she saw me. My father shook my hand, asked how I was. I said, fine. He nodded, didn't ask again. Nobody asked, not really. They'd say, welcome home, and then change the subject. Ask about my plans. Ask if I needed help finding a job. Ask anything except what it was like, what I'd seen, what I'd done, what I'd lost. They didn't want to know, didn't want to hear it. Korea was over, done, finished. Time to move on. No point dwelling on it. No point discussing it. Just move on. Like it never happened. Like 2 years of my life had been deleted. So I stayed silent. What else could I do? Tell them about Danny Morrison screaming for 3 hours? Tell them about James Wu dying confused? Tell them about Mike O'Brien vaporizing? They didn't want to hear it, wouldn't understand it, couldn't handle it. So I kept it inside, locked it away, stayed silent like everyone else, pretended I was fine, pretended Korea hadn't happened, pretended I was the same person I'd been before. I wasn't, would never be again. But I pretended. We all pretended. That was the deal. Come home silent. Stay silent. Die silent. I got a job at a factory, assembly line work, repetitive, mindless, perfect for someone who didn't want to think, didn't want to remember, just wanted to exist. Clock in, work, clock out, go home, sleep if you could, wake up, repeat. I met my wife, Carol, in 1955, 2 years after coming home. Good woman, patient. She knew I'd been in Korea, didn't ask about it, didn't push, just accepted that there were parts of me I wouldn't talk about. Parts of me that were closed off, dead, silent. We got married in 1956, had our son in 1954. Normal life, normal family, normal everything, except it wasn't normal, not for me. I was going through the motions, playing the part, husband, father, provider, but I wasn't really there, wasn't present, wasn't alive in any meaningful way. The nightmares started right after I came home, every night. Danny Morrison screaming, Chinese soldiers in the dark, artillery barrages, the cold, the fear. I'd wake up sweating, sometimes screaming. Carol would hold me, ask if I was okay. I'd say yes, lie, go back to sleep, dream it again. 19 years. 19 years of nightmares. 19 years of pretending I'm fine. 19 years of watching the world move on while I stayed stuck in Korea. In those mountains, in those trenches. Watching Danny die and James die and Mike die and all the others. Nobody talked about Korea. Not in the 19 years since. It barely came up. When it did, people shrugged. Oh, right, that war. Forgotten before it even ended. Buried under the prosperity of the 50s. Buried under the Cold War tensions. Buried under Vietnam. Vietnam. That's the war everyone talks about now. That's the war everyone protests. That's the war everyone cares about. The boys coming home from Vietnam, some of them get spit on, called baby killers, treated like criminals. At least they're being noticed. At least people care enough to hate them. We didn't even get that. We got nothing. Just silence. Just forgetting. Just erasure. The forgotten war and the forgotten veterans. Fighting for a country that forgot us before we even came home. I see the Vietnam vets now. See their struggle. See them fighting for recognition, for benefits, for acknowledgement that they served and suffered and deserve help. And I think, at least they're fighting. At least they're demanding to be seen. We just accepted the silence, accepted the forgetting, accepted that our service didn't matter. Maybe we shouldn't have. Maybe we should have demanded parades, demanded recognition, demanded that America acknowledge what we did, what we sacrificed, what we lost. But we didn't. We came home quiet, stayed quiet, died quiet. That's what we did. That's what Korea taught us. Suffer in silence, die in silence, be forgotten in silence. My son asked me yesterday about enlisting, about Vietnam, about serving, and something broke. Something I'd kept locked away for 19 years. All the silence, all the forgetting, all the pretending. It cracked, shattered, came pouring out. I told him no, told him to run, told him war isn't glory or honor or service. It's watching 19-year-olds die screaming. It's killing people who look like your friends. It's surviving for no reason while better men die. It's coming home to a country that doesn't care, that forgot you before you even left. I told him about Danny Morrison, about James Wu, about Mike O'Brien, about all of them. Told him about the cold and the fear and the pointlessness. told him about coming home to silence, about 19 years of nightmares, about 19 years of feeling like a ghost in my own life. He didn't know what to say. How could he? His father, the quiet man who never talked about anything, who never showed emotion, who just worked and existed, suddenly screaming about Korea, about death, about forgetting, about silence. Carol came in, heard me, started crying. "Tom, why didn't you ever talk about this? Why didn't you tell me?" Why? Because nobody wanted to hear it. Because the country had moved on. Because Korea was forgotten and so were we, and talking about it wouldn't change that. Because silence was easier than remembering. Because staying closed was easier than opening up and having nobody care. But I'm talking about it now, recording this. Because my son needs to know. Because someone needs to remember. Because the forgotten war and the forgotten veterans can't stay forgotten forever. 37,000 Americans died in Korea. 37,000. More than Vietnam at this point. More than World War I. A major war by any measure. And nobody remembers. Nobody cares. Nobody acknowledges it happened. Those men died anonymously. Died for a stalemate. Died for a line that didn't move. Died for a country that forgot them before they were cold. They deserve better. Deserve to be remembered. Deserve to have their sacrifice acknowledged, even if that sacrifice was pointless. Danny Morrison, James Wu, Mike O'Brien. They were real. They lived. They suffered. They died. They mattered. Even if nobody remembers them. Even if nobody cares. They mattered. I'm 44 years old. It's been 19 years since I came home from Korea. 19 years of silence. 19 years of forgetting. 19 years of pretending I'm fine when I'm not. When I never was. When I never will be. The forgotten war. They got that right. We fought it. We died in it. We came home from it. And America forgot it happened. Forgot we existed. Forgot we sacrificed anything. Forgot we mattered. But we did matter. We do matter. The 37,000 who died matter. The 100,000 who were wounded matter. The millions who served matter. Even if nobody remembers. Even if nobody cares. We matter. I'm breaking the silence now. 19 years late. Too late for Danny and James and Mike. Too late for all of them. But not too late to say it. Not too late to remember. Not too late to acknowledge that we fought and suffered and died and came home to nothing. My son won't enlist, won't go to Vietnam, won't fight in a war that might be forgotten just like Korea was. I'll make sure of that. I'll break the silence. I'll tell him everything. I'll make him understand what war really costs, what service really means, what coming home really feels like when your country doesn't care. The silence ends here, with me, with this recording, with this testimony. Korea happened. We fought it. We died in it. We came home from it broken and forgotten and silent. But we were there. We mattered. We deserve to be remembered. Even if America forgot us, we can't forget each other. Can't forget Danny and James and Mike and all the others. Can't forget the cold and the fear and the suffering. Can't forget that we gave 2 years of our lives, or all of our lives, for a country that couldn't even be bothered to throw us a parade. The forgotten war, the forgotten veterans, the forgotten dead, the forgotten sacrifice. But not forgotten by us, never forgotten by us. We remember, even if nobody else does. We remember. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that has to be enough. Because 19 years of silence is too long. 37,000 dead deserve more than forgetting, deserve more than silence, deserve to be acknowledged, deserve to be remembered, deserve to matter. So I'm saying it now, recording it, making sure someone knows, making sure someone remembers, making sure the silence doesn't win. Korea happened. We were there. We fought. We bled. We died. We came home. And we mattered. Even if nobody else thinks so, we mattered. That's what I want my son to know, what I want anyone listening to this to know. The forgotten war wasn't forgotten by us. The forgotten veterans remember. The silent ones are speaking. The erased ones existed. We were there. We mattered. We deserved to be remembered. And the silence ends now.